The rain hammered against my apartment windows like angry fists, each drop exploding into 1,000 smaller pieces before sliding down the glass in crooked rivers. I was 3 chapters deep into a terrible romance novel when a knock came. Not the confident rap of a neighbor or the urgent pounding of someone in trouble, but a soft, hesitant tap-tap-tap that barely registered over the storm. I paused, listening. Nothing. Must have been the wind rattling something loose on the fire escape. I returned to my book, where the brooding vampire was about to confess his undying love to the plucky librarian, when the sound came again. Top, top, top. Definitely a knock. Setting the book aside with a sigh, I padded to the door in my worn slippers. The peephole revealed nothing but the dimly lit hallway, empty except for Mrs. Chen's plastic flowers wilting in their pot. I was about to turn away when I noticed something at the bottom edge of my vision. I crouched down and looked again. A woman sat curled against my door, knees drawn up to her chest. What I could see of her was unusual, to put mildly. Auburn hair that seemed to shimmer with an inner light fell in waves around shoulders wrapped in what looked like a tattered silver cloak. But it was the ears that made me blink twice. Fox ears, twitching nervously atop her head, covered in the same auburn fur as her hair. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door slowly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up with eyes the color of autumn leaves, wide and frightened. Her face was delicate, with high cheekbones and a small, pointed chin. When she saw me, she scrambled backward against the opposite wall. "Please," she whispered, her voice carrying a melodic accent I couldn't place. "I mean no harm. I seek only shelter from a storm." She was soaked to the bone, silver cloak clinging to her small frame. Water dripped from her hair and ears, forming puddles on the hallway carpet. Despite her strange appearance, she looked utterly miserable and harmless. "Are you hurt?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. She shook her head, sending droplets flying. "Only cold and tired. I have traveled far." I glanced down the empty hallway. Mrs. Chan would have a field day if she saw this, and Mr. Rodriguez was already suspicious about the weird noises coming from my apartment. The last thing I needed was to explain why there was a woman with fox ears camping outside my door. "Come inside," I said, stepping back. "Before someone sees you." Her eyes widened further. "You would trust a stranger? One such as I? Lady, you're half drowned and sitting in a puddle. I'm pretty sure you're not here to rob me." I held the door open wider. "Besides, it's 3 in the morning, and you look like you haven't slept in days." She rose gracefully despite her obvious exhaustion. Up close, I could see she was shorter than me by almost a foot, with delicate features that seemed almost porcelain-like. The silver cloak was actually made of some kind of metallic fabric that caught the light strangely, and underneath it she wore what looked like a bodysuit of the same material. "I'm called Kira," she said, stepping tentatively across the threshold. "Marcus." I closed the door behind her and turned the locks. "You can leave the wet cloak by the door. I'll get you a towel and something warm to drink." She hesitated, then unfastened the cloak's clasp. Underneath, the bodysuit covered her from neck to toe, leaving only her hands and feet bare. The material seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury, conforming perfectly to her slight frame. I fetched my largest bath towel from the linen closet and handed it to her. She accepted it gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders like a shawl. Her fox ears poked through her hair, still dripping. "There, coffee? Hot chocolate?" I asked, heading toward the kitchen. "I do not know these words," she said softly. I paused, halfway to the coffee maker. "Warm drinks, to help chase away the cold." Yes, please. Anything warm will be most welcome." I put the kettle on and rummaged through my tea collection, settling on chamomile. Something soothing seemed appropriate. While the water heated, I studied my unexpected guest. She sat perched on the edge of my couch like a bird ready to take flight, the towel clutched tightly around her shoulders. Her tail, which I now noticed, was bushy and auburn like her hair, tucked neatly beside her. "So," I said, leaning against the kitchen counter. "This might sound like a strange question, but are you human?" Kira's ears flattened against her head. "You fear me now that you see what I truly am." "Fear you? You're the size of a strong wind could blow you over. and you asked permission before coming inside. I'm curious, not afraid. She tilted her head, studying me with those autumn leaf eyes. You are unusual, Marcus of this place. Most humans react with violence or terror when they encounter my kind. Your kind being? The Vulpinians. What you might call the fox people. She pulled the towel tighter. We are travelers between worlds, but this realm has not been kind to my species. The kettle whistled, giving me a moment to process this information. Fox people. Travelers between worlds. Either I was dreaming, having some kind of breakdown, or my boring Tuesday night had just gotten a lot more interesting. I poured the hot water over the tea bag and carried the mug to her. She accepted it with both hands, inhaling the steam gratefully. Between worlds, I repeated, settling into the armchair across from her. As in other planets? Dimensions, she corrected. Layers of reality that exist alongside your own. The barriers between them have been compromised in recent cycles. She sipped the tea and sighed contentedly. This is pleasant. Thank you for your kindness, Marcus. Don't mention it. I watched her carefully. Either she was the most elaborate cosplayer in history, or I was having a conversation with an actual alien. Given the way her ears moved independently and her tail swished when she was nervous, I was leaning toward the latter. So what brings you to my particular corner of reality? Kira's expression darkened. Hunters. My ship was damaged in an encounter with their vessels. I managed to reach this dimension, but my navigation systems failed. I have been wandering your city for several days, seeking a safe place to attempt repairs. Hunters, a species that preys upon travelers like myself. They harvest our life essence for their own purposes. She shuddered, ears flattening again. They are relentless once they catch your scent. I lean back, trying to wrap my head around this. And you've been wandering around for days? Where have you been sleeping? Wherever I could find shelter. Your city has many dark places where one can hide, but they're not safe for long. She took another sip of tea. I grew desperate as my strength failed. When I saw the warm light from your dwelling and sensed your... She paused, tilting her head. Your energy is different from other humans. Calmer, less afraid of the unknown. Great. I give off calm vibes to interdimensional travelers. I couldn't help but smile. So what's the plan now? You said something about repairs. Kira reached into a hidden pocket in her bodysuit and withdrew what looked like a piece of broken crystal the size of my palm. It pulsed with a faint blue light. My navigation core. Without it, I cannot return to my own dimension or even properly control my ship. She cradled it gently. But the damage is beyond my ability to repair alone. What kind of help do you need? The core requires a specific resonance frequency to reintegrate its fractured components. Among my people, this is typically done through shared mental focus, but she looked up at me hopefully. Human consciousness operates on similar wavelengths. If you were willing to assist, it might be possible to heal the damage. I stared at the crystal. It really was glowing, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. This was crazy. This whole situation was insane. I was sitting in my living room at 3 in the morning, having tea with a fox-eared alien who wanted my help fixing her interdimensional navigation system. What would I need to do? Hope flickered in her eyes. Simply focus your thoughts while I attempt the repair. Your mental energy would amplify my own, providing the strength needed to reunite the crystal's broken bonds. It sounded simple enough if I ignored the part where it was completely impossible according to everything I knew about physics. But then again, fox people from other dimensions weren't exactly covered in my college textbooks either. Okay, I said. Let's give it a try. Kira's ears perked up literally. You will help me? Why not? It's not like my night was going anywhere special anyway. I gestured to the romance novel lying forgotten on the side table. Though I have to ask, what happens if it doesn't work? Her expression grew troubled. Then I remained trapped here, and eventually the hunters will track me down. They are drawn to the energy signature all Vulpinians emit. The longer I stay in one place, the easier I become to locate. And what happens to me if they show up? I would not let harm come to you, she said fiercely. You have shown me kindness when you had no obligation to do so. My people do not forget such debts. Looking at her small form wrapped in my bath towel, I found her protective instincts both touching and slightly amusing. But there was steel in her voice that suggested she was more capable than her appearance indicated. All right then, tell me what I need to do. Kira set down her tea and unwrapped the towel, placing it carefully beside her. She held the broken crystal between her palms and closed her eyes. Place your hands over mine, she instructed. Close your eyes and clear your mind of all thoughts except the desire to heal what is broken. I moved to sit beside her on the couch and covered her small hands with my larger ones. The crystal felt warm against my palms, and I could swear I felt it vibrating slightly. Now, Kira whispered, focus on wholeness, on things that are broken becoming complete again. I closed my eyes and tried to empty my mind. It was harder than it sounded. Random thoughts kept intruding. Did I remember to lock the door? Was this all an elaborate hallucination? What would I tell my boss if I was late to work because I was up all night helping an alien fix her spaceship? But gradually, the warmth from the crystal seemed to spread up my arms, and my scattered thoughts began to settle. I found myself thinking about things that had been repaired in my life. The watch my grandfather had fixed when I was 10. The friendship I'd mended with my college roommate after a stupid fight. The old car I'd spent months restoring in my garage. The crystal's pulse began to strengthen, and I felt an odd sensation like my thoughts were flowing out through my hands and mixing with something else. Something warm and gentle and utterly foreign. Thank you, a voice whispered in my mind, though Kira's lips hadn't moved. Your spirit is strong and kind. I see now why my people once valued human friendship so highly. The warmth intensified, becoming almost hot, and the crystal's glow brightened even through my closed eyelids. For a moment, it felt like my consciousness was expanding, touching something vast and beautiful and completely beyond my understanding. Then it was over. The warmth faded, leaving only the normal sensation of skin touching skin. I opened my eyes to find Kira staring at the crystal in wonder. It was whole again, the cracks gone as if they had never existed. The blue light now pulsed steadily, strong and bright. It worked, she breathed. Marcus, it actually worked. You have a gift. The gift, the ability to join your consciousness with another's. It is rare even among my own people, and almost unheard of among humans. She looked up at me with something approaching awe. With this core restored, I can return to my ship and begin proper repairs. I felt an unexpected pang at her words. You're leaving? She paused, ears drooping slightly. I had not considered. That is, my ship requires extensive work, and my supplies are limited. Even with the core restored, I estimate several days before I can attempt dimensional travel. You could stay here, I offered before I could stop myself. I mean, if you want to. It's probably safer than wandering around the city. Kira's ears perked up again, and a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. You would truly allow this? Even knowing what I am. What you are is someone who needed help, and I had the ability to provide it. I shrugged. Besides, it's not every day you get to meet a traveler from another dimension. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious to learn more. Then, I would be honored to accept your hospitality, Marcus of Earth. She bowed her head formally. I swear by the stars that guide my people that I will bring no harm to your dwelling or your person. Just Marcus is fine, I said with a laugh. And you don't need to swear by anything. Though I should probably warn you that my neighbors are pretty nosy. We might need to work on disguising your more distinctive features. Kira's hand went self-consciously to her ears. Among my people, these are marks of beauty and wisdom. They are beautiful, I assured her, and meant it. But humans might have questions we're not ready to answer. She nodded thoughtfully. I possess certain abilities that might assist with concealment. Shape-shifting is a basic skill among travelers. You can change how you look to a degree. Observe. She closed her eyes and concentrated. The fox ears slowly flattened and seemed to melt into her hair, which shortened and darkened to a more ordinary brown. Her tail curled up and vanished beneath the metallic fabric of her bodysuit. When she opened her eyes, they were a normal human green instead of autumn gold. Impressive, I said, though you still look like you're wearing liquid metal. She glanced down at her outfit. This is my environmental suit. It protects me from the harmful radiations present in most dimensions. But you're correct that it might draw attention. I've got some spare clothes that might fit you. They'll be too big, but it's better than the spacesuit look. Spacesuit? Never mind. Tomorrow, if you want, we can get you something that fits properly. I stood up and headed toward my bedroom. For tonight, let's just focus on getting you warm and dry. As I rummaged through my dresser for the smallest clothes I owned, I tried to process what had just happened. An alien had shown up at my door. I'd helped her fix her interdimensional navigation system with my thoughts. And now she was staying in my apartment. If someone had told me this morning that this was how my day would end, I'd have recommended therapy. But as I listened to Kira moving around in my living room, humming softly to herself in a language I didn't recognize, I found I didn't really care how impossible it all was. For the first time in months, I felt like I was part of something larger than my routine of work, takeout, and terrible romance novels. I returned with an old college sweatshirt and a pair of sweatpants, both of which would probably hang on her like a tent. She had been examining my bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines with curious interest. Your people record knowledge in physical objects, she observed. Books, yeah, though most of it's digital these days. I handed her the clothes. The bathroom's down the hall if you want to change. She disappeared into the bathroom, and I used the time to clear the couch of its usual collection of mail and magazines. When she emerged, I had to bite back a smile. The sweatshirt reached almost her knees, and the sweatpants were rolled up several times at the ankles. But she looked warm and dry, and infinitely more comfortable than she had in the wet cloak. Better? I asked. Much. Thank you. She settled back onto the couch, curling her legs underneath her. Marcus, may I ask why you helped me? In my travels, I have encountered many species, and most are less welcoming to strangers. I thought about it. I guess I believe in treating people the way I'd want to be treated. If I was stranded somewhere, cold and scared, I'd hope someone would help me too, even if that someone was very different from you. Especially then, I settled into the armchair again. Besides, you're not that different. You're intelligent, you're polite, you make conversation. The ears and tail are actually pretty cool. Kira smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and less fragile. You truly are unusual among your species, Marcus. I begin to understand why my ancestors spoke so highly of humans in the old stories. Your ancestors knew humans? Long ago, before the barriers between dimensions grew strong, there was much travel and trade between our peoples. Humans were known for their curiosity, their adaptability, and their capacity for unexpected kindness. She pulled my sweatshirt closer around herself. I had thought these stories mere legends until tonight. What happened? Why did the contact stop? Kira's expression grew sad. Wars, not between our species, but among the travelers of many dimensions. The barriers were strengthened to prevent conflict from spreading, but they also prevented peaceful contact. For generations, dimensional travel became the province of only the most skilled navigators. And now, the barriers weaken again, but different species emerge from isolation. Some, like the hunters, have become predators. Others, like my people, struggle to survive in a universe that has forgotten the old alliances. I was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Is that why you were alone? Don't your people usually travel in groups? Pain flickered across her features. My pod was lost. I am the only survivor. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. It was not your doing. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. But it is why I must repair my ship and find other Vulpinian settlements. I cannot rebuild alone. Well, you're not alone right now, I pointed out. And tomorrow we'll figure out what your ship needs. She looked at me with those green eyes that had been autumn gold just minutes before. You would come with me to examine my vessel, if you want company. I probably can't help much with alien technology, but I'm pretty good with mechanical stuff. Fixed a few cars in my time. The principles are not so different, she said, and I would appreciate the company. We talked for another hour, with her telling me stories of the places she'd visited and me sharing what I knew about human culture and history. She was fascinated by everything from the way we organized our cities to the concept of television. In return, she painted word pictures of crystal cities that grew like forests and seas that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Finally, exhaustion began to creep in. Kira had been fighting sleep for the last 20 minutes, her eyelids drooping even as she tried to maintain conversation. "You should get some rest," I said. "The couch pulls out into a bed, and there are extra blankets in the closet." "You are too kind, Marcus. I promise I will not impose upon your generosity for long." "Impose away," I said, standing to fetch the bedding. Like I said, this is the most interesting thing that's happened to me in years. As I made up the sofa bed, Kira watched with curious interest. "Is this how all humans sleep? In elevated resting platforms?" "Pretty much. Though some people prefer the floor, I guess." I handed her a pillow. "What do your people use?" "We create resting nests from available materials, shaped to support our natural sleeping postures." She demonstrated by curling up on the bed with her knees drawn up, leaving plenty of room despite the fact that she was using only half the available space. "That actually looks pretty comfortable," I admitted. "You should try it sometime. Your people's habit of sleeping fully extended seems inefficient." I laughed. "I'll keep that in mind. Good night, Kra. Good night, Marcus. And thank you for everything." I turned off the lights and headed to my own room, but sleep was slow in coming. Every few minutes, I'd remember that there was an alien sleeping on my couch, and the strangeness of it would hit me all over again. But stranger still was how natural it felt, like having a friend stay over, except the friend happened to be from another dimension. Somewhere around dawn, I finally drifted off, my dreams filled with crystal cities and ships that sail between stars. I woke to the smell of something burning and the sound of frantic movement in the kitchen. Stumbling out of bed, I found Kira standing over my stove, poking at what had once been eggs with a spatula. Black smoke poured from the pan, while she muttered what I assumed were Vulpinian curse words. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying not to laugh. She spun around, ears visible again now that she was relaxed, drooping with embarrassment. "I attempted to prepare sustenance as thanks for your hospitality, but your food preparation devices are challenging. The eggs look like charcoal, and the pan would probably never be the same." But her expression was so genuinely distressed that I couldn't bring myself to care about either. "Don't worry about it," I said, taking the spatula and turning off the burner. "Cooking takes practice. How about I make breakfast, and you can watch, learn the local techniques." Relief flooded her features. "You would not mind? I fear I have damaged your cooking implement. It's just a pan. They make more." I opened the window to let out the smoke. "Besides, you're probably the first interdimensional visitor to attempt cooking in this kitchen. That's got to count for something." While I started fresh eggs and put bread in the toaster, Kira perched on one of my bar stools, watching intently. She'd found her way into my spare clothes again, this time a flannel shirt and jeans that, while still too large, looked more normal than the sweatsuit. Her hair was back to its natural auburn, though she kept the fox ears hidden. "Your people consume the reproductive cells of other species?" she asked, watching me crack eggs into the pan. "When you put it like that, it sounds terrible." I laughed. "But yeah, eggs are pretty common." "What do your people eat?" "Primarily cultivated grains and proteins synthesized from atmospheric elements, though we can derive sustenance from most organic matter if necessary." She tilted her head. "The burning of food seems inefficient. Do you not have molecular restructuring capabilities?" "Nope. Fire and chemistry, same as our ancestors." I flipped the eggs, though we've gotten pretty good at it over the millennia. "Fascinating. No wonder your people developed such robust immune systems." The toast popped up, and I buttered it while the eggs finished. When I set the plate in front of her, Kira examined it carefully before taking a cautious bite. Her ears perked up immediately. "This is quite pleasant," she said, sounding surprised. "The thermal preparation actually enhances the flavor compounds." "Wait until you try bacon," I said, settling beside her with my own plate. "So what's the plan for today? You mentioned your ship needs repairs." Kira nodded, swallowing another bite of egg. "It is concealed approximately 3 miles from here in what you call a construction site. The damage is primarily to the hull and propulsion systems, but without proper materials. She shrugged helplessly. What kind of materials? Crystalline matrices for the energy conduits, primarily. Also meta-alloys for hull patching. Such things do not exist in your dimension, but similar compounds might be substituted if properly configured. I thought about this while finishing my breakfast. I might know someone who could help. My friend Jake runs a metal fabrication shop. He works with all kinds of exotic alloys for aerospace contracts. You would introduce me to another human? Kira looked uncertain. Is it wise to reveal my presence? Jake's good people, trustworthy, and if anyone can help figure out what materials you need, it's him. I paused. Though we should probably work on your human disguise first. The ear thing is good, but you still move differently. More graceful than humans usually manage. I can observe and adapt, she said. Mimicry is another traveling skill. Let's start with walking. Humans are kind of clumsy compared to what I've seen from you. For the next hour, I gave Kira a crash course in human body language and movement. She was a quick study, deliberately adding little stumbles and hesitations to her naturally fluid motion. We practiced casual conversation, working on contractions and slang. Her formal speech patterns, while charming, would definitely draw attention. Remember, I said as we prepared to leave, you're my cousin from out of state. You're visiting while you look for work in the city. Cousin, she repeated. A family relation. Yes, I understand. She'd mastered the art of looking appropriately awkward in human clothing, and with her natural features disguised, she could pass for a slightly unusual, but otherwise normal young woman. The only thing that might give her away was her tendency to tilt her head when listening, a habit I noticed was deeply ingrained. The construction site was a half-finished office building downtown, surrounded by chain-link fence and warning signs. Kira led me around to the back, where a section of fence had been subtly altered to allow passage. The gap was nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Impressive camouflage, I said as we slipped through. Survival requires blending with surroundings, she replied. My people learned this necessity long ago. She guided me through the maze of construction equipment and building materials to what looked like a pile of scrap metal and plastic sheeting. But when Kira pressed her hand against a particular piece of debris, the entire pile shimmered and revealed itself as a sophisticated holographic disguise. Underneath was her ship. I'd expected something sleek and futuristic, maybe saucer-shaped or angular like the spaceships in movies. Instead, Kira's vessel looked more like a large metallic egg, about the size of a small airplane, but smoothly oval without any visible seams or joints. The surface was a dark, iridescent material that seemed to shift color as I moved around it. It's beautiful, I said, running my hand along the hull. The metal was warm to the touch and hummed faintly. She's called Whisper of Stars, Kira said, pride evident in her voice. My grandmother's ship, passed down through 3 generations of navigators. A section of the hull simply dissolved as Kira approached, revealing an opening just large enough for us to enter. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Everything was curved and organic-looking, as if the ship had been grown rather than built. Soft bioluminescent panels provided gentle lighting, and the air smelled of something like cinnamon and rain. The damage is here, Kira said, leading me toward what I assumed was the back of the ship. And here, the problems were immediately obvious. A jagged hole about the size of my fist had been punched through the hull, and several of the crystalline panels that lined the walls were cracked or completely shattered. Worse, what looked like the main engine was partially melted, its delicate internal structures warped beyond recognition. What did this? I asked, examining the hull breach. Hunter weapons. They use coherent energy beams that disrupt molecular bonds. Kira's voice was tight with remembered fear. I was fortunate to escape with only this damage. I walked around the engine, trying to understand its construction. It was like nothing I'd ever seen, all flowing curves and integrated crystal matrices. But there were patterns I recognized, principles that seemed universal regardless of the technology level. The energy flow here, I said, pointing to what looked like a main conduit. It's been severed completely. And these crystal things, they're like circuit boards. Precisely. They channel and focus the dimensional energies that allow travel between realities. Kira knelt beside the damaged engine. Without them, I can achieve only basic propulsion within this dimension. Can they be repaired, or do you need new ones? The smaller fractures can be healed using the same technique we employed last night. But the completely shattered matrices must be replaced. She picked up a piece of broken crystal, its faceted surface reflecting the bioluminescent lighting. The material is grown, not manufactured. It takes months to mature a single matrix. But you said similar compounds might work as substitutes. In theory, the crystals serve to focus mental energy into dimensional manipulation. Any sufficiently pure crystalline structure with a proper resonance frequency could potentially be adapted. I thought about this. What about quartz? It's pretty pure, and it's used in electronics for frequency control. Kira's eyes widened. Quartz? Your people use crystalline matrices in their technology. Well, not exactly like this. But, yeah, quartz crystals are common in computers and radios. Jake might have access to laboratory-grade stuff through his aerospace connections. Show me, she said eagerly. I pulled out my phone and brought up some images of quartz crystals explaining how they were used in oscillators and frequency generators. Kira studied the pictures intently, occasionally asking me to enlarge specific details. The structure is crude but fundamentally sound, she said finally. With proper preparation, these might indeed serve as temporary replacements. But the resonance frequency must be precisely tuned, and the matrices must be bonded at the quantum level with the ship's existing systems. One step at a time, I said. Let's see what Jake can find, then worry about the technical details. We spent another hour examining the damage and making notes about what materials we'd need. Kira's ship had impressive self-repair capabilities for minor damage, but the major components would require external assistance. The hull breach could be patched with almost any compatible metal, but it needed to be molecularly bonded to the existing structure. Your people's metallurgy is more advanced than I expected, Kira admitted as we prepared to leave. The construction equipment here contains alloys that could serve our purposes with minimal adaptation. You mean steel construction materials? Borrow temporarily, she corrected with a small smile. I fully intend to return anything we take once Whisper of Stars is space-worthy again. And if someone notices their stuff is missing, they will assume it was misplaced or stolen by others. Construction sites experience frequent pilferage, do they not? I had to admit she had a point. You've done your research. Survival requires understanding local customs and behaviors, she said as we slipped back through the fence. Though I confess your species' tendency toward casual theft is puzzling. Yeah, we're working on that. The walk to Jake's shop gave us a chance to practice Kira's human impersonation in public. She did well, though I caught her staring up at the sky several times with an expression of longing that made my chest tight. She was homesick, I realized, trapped in an alien dimension, surrounded by strange people and unfamiliar technology, with no guarantee she'd ever see her own world again. You okay? I asked as we waited for a traffic light. I am merely overwhelmed by the differences, she said quietly. Your sun feels wrong against my skin. The air tastes strange. Even the gravity is subtly different from my home world. But you can adapt? For a time. My people are resilient. But prolonged exposure to incompatible dimensional frequencies causes difficulties. She glanced at me. It is nothing you need concern yourself with. The light changed, and we crossed, but her words worried me. How long did she have before this dimension started affecting her health? And what would happen if we couldn't repair her ship in time? Jake's fabrication shop occupied a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. The sign outside read Precision Metalworks, Aerospace, and Industrial Applications. But Jake's real specialty was solving impossible engineering problems. If it could be built from metal, plastic, or ceramic, Jake could figure out how to do it. I found him in his office, surrounded by technical manuals and coffee-stained blueprints. Jake was a big man with calloused hands and grease permanently embedded under his fingernails. He'd been my friend since high school, and he was one of the few people I trusted completely. Marcus, he stood up and clapped me on the shoulder. What brings you to my humble establishment? Please tell me you haven't blown up another carburetor. Nothing like that. Jake, I'd like you to meet my cousin Kira. She's visiting from up north. Kira stepped forward and extended her hand in the formal handshake we practiced. Pleased to meet you, Jake. Marcus speaks highly of your expertise. Cousin, huh? Jake studied her with the kind of attention he usually reserved for complex engineering problems. Funny, you don't look much like Marcus. Different bone structure entirely. Distant cousin, I said quickly, and she needs some help with the materials problem. Something unusual. Unusual how? I glanced at Kira, who nodded almost imperceptibly. We'd agreed that Jake would need some version of the truth if he was going to help effectively. She's working on a prototype, experimental propulsion system, but she needs some specific crystalline components and some unusual alloys. Jake's eyebrows went up. Propulsion? What kind of propulsion? Theoretical physics, Kira said smoothly. Manipulation of electromagnetic fields for thrust generation. The mathematics are quite complex. I'll bet they are. Jake gestured for us to follow him into the main workshop. Show me what you're talking about. Kira had brought one of the smaller damaged crystals, wrapped in a cloth. She unwrapped it carefully and set on Jake's workbench. Even broken, it caught the fluorescent lighting and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Jake picked it up gently, turning it over in his hands. I've never seen anything like this. The crystalline structure is incredible. How is it grown? Proprietary process, Kira said. Trade secrets, you understand, right? Jake set the crystal down and leaned back against the bench. Okay, I'll bite. What do you need? Laboratory-grade quartz crystals, as pure as possible, and some kind of bonding agent that works at the molecular level. I pulled out my phone and showed him the notes we'd made. Also, if you have access to any titanium-aluminum composites, that would help with another part of the project. Jake studied the list, occasionally glancing back at Kira's broken crystal. The quartz I can get. I've got contacts at the university lab who owe me favors. The bonding agent, that's trickier. You're talking about serious chemistry there. What about ultrasonic welding? Kira asked. Or laser sintering at the molecular level? Jake blinked. You know about ultrasonic welding? I read extensively, she said with a slight smile. Okay, yeah, ultrasonic might work depending on what you're trying to bond. But laser sintering at the molecular level, that's cutting-edge stuff. I mean, it exists, but it's experimental and expensive as hell. Cost is not a primary concern, Kira said. This is important research. Jake looked between us, clearly sensing that there was more to this story than we were telling him. But he'd been my friend long enough to know when not to ask too many questions. All right, he said finally. Give me a day or two to make some calls. The quartz shouldn't be too hard to source, and I think I know someone who might let us borrow time on a molecular level fabrication setup. He paused. But I want to see this prototype when you're done. Whatever you're building, it's got my curiosity up. Absolutely, I said. As soon as it's ready for testing. Fair enough. Jake wrapped the crystal back in its cloth and handed it to Kira. One more thing, though. This research of yours, it's legal, right? Because some of the equipment you're talking about has export restrictions. Completely legal, Kira assured him. Purely theoretical applications. Good enough for me. We left the shop with Jake's promise to have materials within 48 hours. As we walked back toward my apartment, Kira was quieter than usual, lost in thought. Something wrong? I asked. Jake is more observant than you warned me, she said. He suspects we are not telling him the complete truth. Jake's smart, and he's worked on enough classified projects to recognize when something's unusual. But he's also trustworthy. If he said he'd help, he will. And if he demands a full explanation, I thought about this. Then we'll figure out how much to tell him. Jake's good people, but you're right that this is bigger than just helping a friend with a project. We were passing a small park when Kira suddenly stopped walking. Her head was tilted upward, eyes closed, as if she was listening to something I couldn't hear. What is it? I asked. Scanning frequencies, she said quietly. Someone is looking for me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The hunters? I cannot be certain. The signature is different from what I remember. But someone is definitely conducting an active search of this area. Should we run? Kira opened her eyes and looked at me. Running would only confirm my presence if they detected. Better to behave normally while I attempt to determine their location and intent. She resumed walking, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Her disguised ears kept twitching, a nervous habit she couldn't quite suppress. We made it another block before she spoke again. "There," she said, nodding toward a black van parked across the street. Two occupants, both using scanning equipment of some kind. "Ik glanced over casually." The van looked ordinary enough, but something about the way it was positioned gave me the creeps. Are they watching us? Not specifically. They appear to be conducting a systematic search grid. Kira's voice was calm, but I could hear the underlying fear. "We should return to your dwelling quickly, but without obvious haste." The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. We walked at a normal pace, stopping occasionally to look in shop windows or wait for traffic lights. But every step felt exposed and dangerous. The black van didn't follow us directly, but I caught glimpses of it on parallel streets, maintaining roughly the same distance. It wasn't until we were safely inside my apartment with the door locked that I felt like I could breathe again. "How much time do we have?" I asked. "Unknown. If they're using standard tracking protocols, they will eventually detect my dimensional signature despite my shielding." Kira collapsed onto the couch, suddenly, looking exhausted. The concealment requires constant mental energy to maintain. I cannot sustain it indefinitely. So we need to speed up the timeline. "Yes, but even with your friend's assistance, the repairs will take time. And if I am discovered before Whisper of Stars is ready." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. I'd seen enough action movies to know how this kind of story usually ended for the alien. "Then, we don't let them find you," I said firmly. "Jake said he'd have materials in 48 hours. Can you hold out that long?" "I will have to." I paced around the living room, thinking furiously. What if we could confuse their search somehow? Make it harder to track you? "How do you mean?" "I don't know. Some kind of interference? Or maybe an idea was forming. You said your people use mental energy to power their technology. What if we could amplify your concealment the same way we fixed the navigation crystal?" Kira sat up straighter. "That might actually be possible. If you were willing to share your mental energy again, it could significantly extend my ability to maintain a disguise." "What would I need to do?" "Simply remain in close proximity while maintaining the same focus calm you achieved last night. Your natural shielding would reinforce my own." "Close proximity meaning what exactly?" "Physical contact would be ideal, but proximity within a few feet should suffice." She looked up at me hopefully. "You would be willing to do this?" "Of course. Though it might make going to work tomorrow interesting." "You have employment obligations?" I'd completely forgotten about my job. "Yeah, I'm supposed to be at the office by 9. Accounting firm downtown." Kira's expression fell. "I cannot ask you to neglect your responsibilities for my sake." "You're not asking. I'm offering." I sat down beside her on the couch. "Besides, I've got vacation days saved up. And this is definitely more important than reviewing tax returns." "Marcus." Her voice was soft. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me, yet you risk your safety and livelihood to help." I thought about how to answer that. The truth was, I wasn't entirely sure myself. Part of it was simple human decency, but there was something more. Something about the way she'd looked when she first appeared at my door, lost and frightened but still polite. Something about her courage in the face of impossible odds. "Because it's the right thing to do," I said finally. "And because—" I paused, searching for the right words. "Because you're the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm not ready to let that go yet." Kira smiled, the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen from her since the moment we'd spotted the van. "Your species truly is remarkable, Marcus of Earth. No wonder my ancestors spoke of humans with such fondness." "Just Marcus," I reminded her. "And your ancestors were probably just as remarkable to the humans they met." "Perhaps." She settled back against the couch cushions. "Shall we begin? The concealment will be easier to maintain if I do not have to fight fatigue as well." I moved closer, close enough that our shoulders were almost touching. "Like this." "Perfect." Kira closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Now, simply relax and think calm thoughts. Let your mind drift." I leaned back and let my eyes drift shut. Almost immediately, I felt that same warm sensation I'd experienced while helping her repair the navigation crystal. But this time it was gentler, less intense, like a quiet current flowing between us. Thank you, asterisk her voice whispered in my mind again. For everything. Thank me when we get your ship fixed, and you're safely home, asterisk I thought back, not sure if she could hear me. Home, asterisk she repeated, and I caught an echo of longing so deep it made my chest ache. Asterisk yes. Home would be very good indeed. Asterisk as the afternoon wore on, we settled into an oddly comfortable routine. Kira dozed fitfully while I read, our shared mental connection providing the energy she needed to maintain her concealment. Every few hours she'd check for scanning signals, but the searchers seemed to have moved on to other areas of the city. By evening, we were both exhausted but hopeful. We'd made contact with Jake, identified materials that might work for repairs, and successfully evaded detection for an entire day. It was progress. But as I made dinner and listened to Kira humming softly to herself in the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that our luck wouldn't hold forever. Somewhere out there, the hunters were still looking for her. And when they found her trail again, 48 hours might not be nearly enough time. Jake called at 7 the next morning, which meant either very good news or very bad news. I answered groggily while Kira sat up on the couch, instantly alert in that way that only people who'd lived with constant danger could manage. Marcus, you need to get down here right now. Jake's voice was tight with excitement and worry. And bring your cousin. We got a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that involves 3 guys in black suits asking questions about unusual material requisitions. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. They showed up an hour ago with badges and official-looking paperwork. FBI, they said, but something feels off. My blood went cold. Beside me, Kira had gone completely still, her disguised features sharp with concentration. What did you tell them? I asked. That I put in some requests for specialized materials for a client, but client confidentiality prevented me from saying more without a warrant. Jake paused. They didn't like that answer. Marcus, what the hell have you gotten mixed up in? I'll explain when I see you. Are they still there? No, they left about 10 minutes ago. Said they'd be back with proper documentation. Another pause. Marcus, these guys weren't FBI. I worked enough government contracts to know the real deal when I see it. These guys were something else entirely. We'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, and hung up. Kira was already moving, gathering her few possessions and stuffing them into the small pack she'd arrived with. Her movements were quick and efficient, a traveler's economy of motion. They found your friend, she said without looking up. The hunters are more resourceful than I hoped. Maybe it's not the hunters. Maybe it's just human government types. They tend to get suspicious when people start ordering exotic materials. No, Kira's voice was certain. Human authorities would approach differently. These beings are using your government's methods as camouflage, but their true purpose is the same as always. They hunt. I grabbed my jacket and keys while Kira did something that made her fox features disappear completely. This time she didn't just hide her ears and tail, she actually looked different. Taller, more angular, with darker hair and sharper cheekbones. Is that still you? I asked. A deeper disguise. It requires more energy to maintain, but it will be harder to track. She pulled on my spare jacket, which now fit her almost perfectly. We must warn your friend and retrieve the materials if possible. The drive to Jake's shop felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every black car made me nervous, and I kept checking the mirrors for signs of pursuit. Kira sat silent beside me, eyes closed in concentration, maintaining her new appearance. We found Jake in his workshop, nervously rearranging tools that didn't need rearranging. When we walked in, he barely glanced at Kira before doing a double take. Who's this? He asked. Still my cousin, I said. Just, she looks different without makeup. Jake studied Kira suspiciously. Different how? Because I'm pretty sure this is a completely different person. I'm skilled with cosmetics, Kira said smoothly. Many women are, though perhaps not to this degree. Right. Jake didn't look convinced, but he had bigger concerns. Marcus, I need to know what's really going on here. Those guys this morning, they weren't asking about normal materials. They had questions about dimensional frequency harmonics and crystalline matrix applications. How the hell would government agents know about that stuff? I looked at Kira, who nodded slightly. Time for more of the truth. Jake, if I told you we were working on something that could revolutionize transportation, would you believe me? Depends on what you mean by revolutionize. I mean travel between dimensions. Alternate realities. The kind of stuff that's supposedly impossible, but actually isn't. Jake stared at me for a long moment. Are you having some kind of breakdown? Show him, Kira said quietly. Show me what? Kira closed her eyes and concentrated. Slowly, her disguised features melted away, revealing her natural form. Her fox ears appeared, twitching nervously, and her tail curled around her waist. When she opened her eyes, they were autumn gold again instead of human brown. Jake's wrench clattered to the floor. Holy shit, he whispered. Language, I said automatically, then realized how ridiculous that sounded given the circumstances. Jake, meet Kira. She's from another dimension. Her ship is broken, and there are interdimensional bounty hunters trying to track her down. This is... Jake sat down heavily on a nearby crate. This is insane. You're telling me aliens are real? Not aliens. Beings from parallel dimensions. The universe is a lot bigger and stranger than any of us imagined. I moved closer to Jake, trying to gauge his reaction. And right now, some very unpleasant individuals are hunting Kira. We need your help to repair her ship so she can go home. Jake looked back and, forth between us, his engineer's mind clearly struggling to process what he was seeing. The materials you asked for. They're actually for a spaceship. A dimensional traveling vessel, Kira corrected gently. But, yes, the principle is similar. And the guys in suits this morning? Hunters. They pose as human authorities to avoid drawing attention while they search for travelers like me. Kira's ears flattened against her head. If they return, you will be in considerable danger simply for having assisted me. Jake stood up slowly, walked over to Kira, and extended his hand. Jake Morrison, nice to meet you. Kira shook his hand solemnly. Kira of the Whisper of Stars. I apologize for involving you in this situation, Jake Morrison. Don't apologize yet. First, tell me what you need to get home. Over the next hour, Kira explained the damage to her ship, while Jake asked increasingly technical questions. His initial shock gave way to fascination as she described dimensional travel theory and crystalline matrix technology. By the time she finished, Jake was scribbling calculations on every available scrap of paper. The energy requirements alone should be impossible, he muttered, but if you're manipulating dimensional frequencies rather than actually accelerating through normal space. Precisely. We fold space-time rather than traverse it linearly. Kira seemed pleased to be talking to someone who understood the technical challenges. The crystalline matrices serve as focal points for consciousness-directed energy manipulation. Consciousness-directed? Jake looked up from his calculations. You mean you think the ship into moving? A crude, but essentially accurate description. That's incredible. And Marcus can help with this consciousness stuff. Marcus possesses an unusual talent for mental energy synchronization. Without his assistance, I would not have been able to repair my navigation core. Jake looked at me with something approaching awe. Dude, you're like a psychic mechanic. I'm really not, I protested. I just focused on wanting to help fix something broken. That's exactly what psychic mechanics would say. Despite everything, I found myself laughing. Trust Jake to reduce interdimensional travel to mechanical principles he could understand. Okay, Jake said, getting back to business. The good news is I've got most of what you need. The quartz crystals came in yesterday, and they're beautiful specimens. Laboratory grade, virtually no impurities. And the bad news? Kira asked. The bonding equipment is at the university, and after this morning's visit, I'm not sure it's safe to try the normal channels. Jake rubbed his chin thoughtfully. But I might have an alternative. My buddy Rick works security at the engineering lab. If we can get in after hours, we could use their molecular fabrication setup without leaving a paper trail. That sounds illegal, I pointed out. Technically, yes. But Rick owes me for the time I didn't tell his wife about the poker games in the lab storage room. Jake grinned. Besides, we'd just be borrowing the equipment. It's not like we're stealing anything. Just like borrowing construction materials, Kira murmured, shooting me a meaningful look. What construction materials? Jake asked. Never mind, I said quickly. When can we do this? Tonight, if Rick can clear the building. The lab is usually empty after 9 on weekdays. Jake started gathering papers and tools. But first, we need to get the crystals prepared. That we can do here. Jake led us to a corner of his workshop where he'd set up what looked like a jeweler's station, complete with precision cutting tools and magnification equipment. Arranged on the workbench were a dozen quartz crystals, each about the size of my thumb and perfectly clear. These are gorgeous, Kira said, picking up one of the crystals and holding it to the light. The internal structure is remarkably pure. $20,000 specimens, Jake said proudly. Called in a lot of favors to get these on short notice. Kira set the crystal down and looked at Jake seriously. You understand that I have no way to compensate you for this assistance. I possess nothing of value in your dimension. You're giving me the chance to work on technology that could change everything we know about physics, Jake replied. That's worth more than money. Still, I am in your debt. Then, you can pay me back by making sure this tech gets used for good things when it's fully developed. Kira nodded solemnly. I swear by the stars that guide my people. Jake blinked. That's actually really cool. Do all your people make star oaths? Only for the most serious promises. Right. Well, let's get to work then. The process of preparing the quartz crystals turned out to be part science and part art. Kira had to examine each crystal individually, looking for internal stress patterns and natural resonance frequencies. Jake handled the precision cutting, removing tiny imperfections and shaping the crystals to match the dimensions of Kira's broken matrices. I mostly watched and learned, though occasionally Kira would ask me to hold a crystal while she tested its energy potential. Each time, I'd feel that familiar warm tingle, and the crystal would glow faintly in response. Remarkable, Kira said after the third test. These crude matrices respond to your mental energy almost as readily as our own grown crystals. Crude, Jake protested. These are the purest specimens money can buy. Forgive me. I meant only that they lack the complex internal structures of our cultivated crystals. But for temporary use, they should serve admirably. We'd been working for about 2 hours when Jake's expression suddenly changed. He was looking past us toward the workshop's front windows, his face grim. We've got company, he said quietly. Black SUV just pulled up outside. Kira was moving before I'd even processed the words. She grabbed the prepared crystals and stuffed them in her pack, while Jake started shoving tools into a portable case. Back exit, she asked. Through the storage room, Jake said. But they might have the building surrounded. Let me check. Kira closed her eyes and stood very still for several seconds. 3 vehicles. 6 individuals total. They're positioning themselves to cover all exits. How can you tell? Enhanced hearing and electromagnetic sensitivity. Another traveler adaptation. She opened her eyes. We need to leave now, before they complete their perimeter. Jake led us through the workshop to a storage room filled with metal stock and equipment. The back door opened onto an alley that connected to 3 different streets. If we moved fast, we might be able to slip away before the hunters realized we'd been there. Jake cracked the door and peered out. Looks clear. Wait. Kira touched his shoulder. Allow me. She opened the door wider and sniffed the air like an animal testing for predators. Her ears, visible again now that she dropped her heavy disguise, swiveled independently as she listened for threats. They have not yet reached the rear of the building, she said finally. But they will soon. We must move quickly and quietly. We slipped out into the alley, Jake carrying his tool case, and me hauling a bag of backup crystals. Kira moved like a ghost, her feet making no sound on the concrete. She led us down the alley toward the street that would take us back to my apartment. We were almost at the mouth of the alley when Kira suddenly grabbed both of us and pulled us behind a dumpster. Seconds later, a black SUV cruised slowly past the alley entrance. They're expanding their search grid, she whispered, looking for our exit route. So what's the plan? I asked. We wait until they pass, then move to secondary extraction point. Kira was all business now, her earlier nervousness replaced by focused determination. Jake, you should separate from us. Return to your workshop and Act as though nothing unusual has occurred. Like hell, Jake said. You think I'm going to abandon you guys now? Jake, this isn't your fight, I said. You've already done more than enough. Marcus, I just met a person from another dimension. I helped prepare materials for a faster-than-light spaceship. Do you really think I'm going home to watch TV now? Kira studied Jake's face carefully. You understand the danger? If the hunters identify you as an accomplice, they will not hesitate to eliminate you. Lady, I've been working on classified military projects for 15 years. I know how to keep my mouth shut and watch my back. Very well, but you follow my instructions without question. In situations like this, hesitation means death. Jake nodded seriously. Understood. The SUV made another pass, this time going the opposite direction. Kira waited until the sound of its engine faded completely before moving. Now, she whispered. We emerged from the alley and walked at a normal pace toward the bus stop 2 blocks away. Kira had shifted back into her human disguise, and to any casual observer, we probably looked like 3 friends heading home from work. But I could feel the tension radiating from Kira like heat from an engine. Her head moved constantly, scanning for threats, and I noticed she kept one hand near the pack containing the crystals. The bus won't be here for 10 minutes, I said, checking the schedule posted at the stop. Too long, Kira replied. They'll have vehicles patrolling by then. So what do we do? She looked around, assessing our options. The street was moderately busy with evening traffic, and there were several shops and restaurants nearby. Plenty of places to hide, but also plenty of places for hunters to lurk. There, she said, pointing to a small coffee shop across the street. We blend with the crowd while monitoring hunter movements. The coffee shop was perfect for our needs. Large windows gave us a view of the street in both directions, and the late afternoon crowd provided natural camouflage. We found a table near the back where Kira could sit with her back to the wall and clear sight lines to both the entrance and emergency exit. Jake ordered coffee for all of us while Kira and I kept watch. The normalcy of ordering drinks felt surreal given that we were hiding from interdimensional bounty hunters, but I was grateful for even this small illusion of safety. Okay, Jake said when he returned with our drinks. Now what? We can't stay here forever. We wait for them to conclude their search of the immediate area. Then we proceed to the ship, Kira said. Tonight's timeline remains viable if we can avoid detection for another few hours. And if we can't, Kira was quiet for a moment. Then we consider more desperate alternatives. What kind of alternatives? The kind that involve fighting our way out. The grimness in her voice made it clear that fighting was definitely the last resort. I was about to ask for more details when Kira suddenly went rigid. They're here, she whispered. Through the coffee shop windows, I could see 2 figures in dark suits walking slowly down the sidewalk. They moved with predatory grace, stopping occasionally to examine doorways and storefronts. Even from a distance, something about them seemed off. Too tall, too pale, with movements that were just slightly wrong. Those aren't human, Jake said quietly. No, Kira confirmed. They're wearing human forms, but their true nature bleeds through. Watch how they move. She was right. The hunters' movements were too fluid, like they were floating just slightly above the ground. And their heads turned in quick, jerky motions that reminded me uncomfortably of birds of prey. One of them paused directly across the street from our coffee shop. It turned its head toward our window, and for a terrifying moment, I thought it was looking straight at me. Its eyes were completely black, without any visible whites or irises. Don't move, Kira breathed. Don't even breathe heavily. They sense motion and elevated emotional states. We sat frozen as the hunter continued to scan the area. After what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, it moved on down the street. But I could see more figures in dark suits approaching from other directions. How many? I whispered. At least 6 in the immediate vicinity. Possibly more. Kira's voice was barely audible. They're conducting a systematic sweep. Eventually, they will enter this establishment. So we leave. Not yet. Premature movement will draw their attention. We wait until they pass, then we use the back exit. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. We sat perfectly still occasionally sipping our coffee to maintain the illusion of normalcy, while the hunters conducted their search. I watched them through the window, noting the way other humans seemed unconsciously to avoid them, stepping aside or crossing the street without apparent reason. Finally, the immediate threat moved past our location. Kira waited another 5 minutes before standing slowly. Now, she said, "Jake, leave currency on the table to pay for the beverages. Marcus, follow me, but maintain normal walking speed." We made our way through the coffee shop toward the rear exit, try to look like customers heading to the restroom. The back door opened onto a service alley that connected to the main street 3 blocks from where the hunters were searching. "Your vehicle?" Kira asked as we emerged into the alley. "Park 2 blocks that way," I said, pointing toward my car. "Too risky. They'll be monitoring all vehicles in the search zone." Kira considered our options. We proceed on foot to the ship. It's approximately 2 miles, and the route will take us through areas where their vehicles cannot follow. Through the construction site? Partially. Also through the old subway tunnels that connect to the site. Another traveler showed me the route when I first arrived. "There are other travelers here?" Jake asked. "Not anymore," Kira said sadly. "The hunters found him 3 days ago." The implications of that statement sent a chill down my spine. We weren't just dealing with pursuing enemies. We were dealing with enemies who had already proven successful at hunting people like Kira. "Then, let's not give them another victory," I said firmly. Kira smiled for the first time since the hunters had appeared, spoken like a true ally of the Vulpinian people. "Vulpinian?" Jake asked. "Fox people," I explained. "I'll fill you in while we walk." We set off through the maze of back streets and alleys that would take us to Kira's ship, 3 unlikely companions united by circumstances none of us could have imagined 24 hours earlier. Behind us, the city lights began to twinkle in the gathering darkness, and somewhere among those lights, creatures from another dimension continued their relentless hunt. But we had advantages they might not expect. Human ingenuity, interdimensional crystals, and the stubborn determination not to let the forces of darkness win without a fight. The real test was still ahead. The old subway tunnels beneath the city were darker and more extensive than I'd ever imagined. Kira led us through maintenance access points and forgotten passages with the confidence of someone who'd spent days mapping escape routes. Jake's industrial flashlight cut through the darkness ahead of us, illuminating brick walls that had probably been built a century ago. "How did you find these tunnels?" Jake asked as we descended yet another rusted ladder. "Necessity," Kira replied. The first day after my crash, I realized I needed multiple concealed routes between the ship and the populated areas. These passages connect to the construction site without surface exposure. "Smart thinking," I said. "Try not to think about what else might be lurking down here. Survival requires preparation for all contingencies." We'd been walking for about an hour when Kira suddenly stopped. Her ears, visible again in the tunnel's darkness, swiveled forward as she listened intently. "What is it?" I whispered. "Movement ahead. Not human." Her voice was tight with concern. "They've found the tunnels." Jake immediately turned off his flashlight, plunging us into complete darkness. I could hear my own heartbeat in the sudden silence, and the distant sound of something moving through water. "Can we go back?" I asked. "They would have positioned sentries at all known access points," Kira said. "We must continue forward and hope to avoid direct contact. And if we can't avoid them, then we fight. But hunters are formidable opponents, especially in confined spaces." "Great." I tried to remember everything I'd ever learned about self-defense, which amounted to a few karate lessons in college and watching action movies. Jake was bigger and stronger than me, but somehow I doubted that would matter much against interdimensional predators. "Stay close," Kira whispered. "Follow my lead exactly. And whatever happens, do not use artificial light unless I give permission." We moved forward in single file, with Kira leading and Jake bringing up the rear. The tunnel floor was uneven and occasionally wet, forcing us to feel our way along the walls. Several times I heard small splashes ahead of us, growing closer. After what felt like miles, but was probably only a few hundred yards, Kira guided us into a side passage barely wide enough for one person. We pressed ourselves against the damp brick wall and waited. The splashing sounds grew louder, accompanied by what sounded like multiple voices speaking in a language that made my teeth ache. The voices had an odd harmonic quality, like they were coming from throats not designed for human speech. 3 of them. Kira breathed directly into my ear. They're searching systematically, but haven't detected us yet. The sounds reached their closest point and began to fade. We waited another 10 minutes before Kira deemed it safe to continue. The rest of the journey through the tunnels passed without incident, but I could feel the weight of pursuit pressing down on us like a physical force. We finally emerged through a concealed grate in the construction site's basement level. Kira's ship was only a few hundred yards away, but crossing the open ground felt impossibly dangerous after the claustrophobic safety of the tunnels. The holographic concealment should hide us from casual observation, Kira said as we approached the disguised vessel. But if the hunters have advanced scanning equipment, they may be able to penetrate the illusion. The ship revealed itself as we drew near.